Since the start of the pandemic in 2020 and the end of the lockdowns, we have really seen a disturbing rise in gun violence across the country. And it really seems to have affected cities big and small all over the country. For many years, we had been seeing a decline in gun violence, although it remains a terrible problem in this country. But the last couple of years, it has been a really significant rise in 2020 and then again in 2021. In the Midwest, Chicago, Milwaukee, Baltimore, St. Louis, those cities have seen some pretty dramatic increases. By virtually every measure, the United States has gun violence that is just wildly disproportionate to other countries. There's this perception, which is accurate, that there are a whole heck of a lot of guns in the United States. And statistically speaking, we know that the more guns there are in a society, the more shootings occur. The really important thing to keep in perspective is that even though the numbers are up, and it's terrible to see this, the rates of gun violence, of gun death, are not as high as they were in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Gun violence had been moderated for the past 10, 20 years. And this is a real shock to see these numbers climbing as rapidly as they have been in the past couple of years. The activists I've talked to say that a lot of the contribution has come from social media. When you had people locked in their houses, all they were doing was posting online. That had very real consequences because people would pick fights with each other. And then once the lockdowns were being lifted, people started meeting up to settle those scores. Driving that even further was you had more guns on the street because people had used their stimulus checks to buy guns in a way that they had not been able to do so before. And then you had the increase in the sort of large capacity magazines and a number of different devices on those guns that allowed people to shoot more quickly. So instead of a drive-by shooting in which 1 or 2 people were hurt, you had a drive-by shooting in which 5 people or 10 people were hurt. At the federal level, President Biden just pushed forward new regulations aimed at cracking down on what they call these ghost guns. And those are guns that are assembled at home from parts you buy over the internet or you modify yourself. And those are guns that can't be traced, can't be tracked. That's why they're called ghost guns. But at the local level, a lot of the activists I've talked to said we really need to be approaching this in a holistic or systemic way, asking the question, why do people feel like settling scores with guns is the right approach? And finding ways to get people support, get them jobs, make them feel like valued members of our society.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.